Betrayal at Baldur's Gate, a new version of the classic game Betrayal at House on the Hill, a classic among players of games, not classic in the same sense of chess or checkers, but within the hobby community, that is a game that has been very important and very popular. And it is a game that is so unique. What is great about the original Betrayal is how incredibly thematic it is. It has to be one of the most thematic games that I know. It is all about the theme, the story, the events that happen on the table, on the board, in the fictional world that you imagine in your head as you're interacting with the components of the game and with the other players. The original game has a horror theme, and the game always starts in the same way, in a sort of like gameplay about self-aggrandizing. The players are trying to quote-unquote level up their characters, to acquire upgrades, weapons, traits, to improve for when the real challenge starts. The real challenge starts in the second part of the game, which is called the Hunt. There is a random procedure that determines when the hunt starts, the second part of the game starts, and then determines which of 50 possible scenarios you're going to play. And these scenarios will tell you different stories, represent different events, and they have different conditions. To me, the mind-blowing element is that, in fact, Betrayal is so thematic, so much about the theme and so little about the rules and the mechanics, that as you start playing the game, you do not know what kind of game you're playing. You do not know the game that you're playing, because the victory conditions may end up being cooperative. Everybody's working together as a team against a common threat. Or, as the title says, in some of the scenarios, there will be a traitor. The traitor is now fighting against the other players. Now it's team-based and competitive. Everybody against that person who is going to win alone or is going to lose alone. Or it could be there's no traitor, but it's not competitive, it's not cooperative, it is competitive, zero-sum, everybody against everybody else, only one winner. You do not know what kind of game you're playing. You know it's a horror story and it's fun and weird stuff happens. I was therefore super excited as a fan of Betrayal at House on the Hill when I learned that there was a version that had D&D, because then you had one of the most thematic board games of all time together with the first role-playing game, the very source, the very origin of storytelling in modern gaming, the very game that propagated the idea, popularized the idea that games can be playable narratives. Mind blown number 2. After the first Betrayal was mind-blowing enough, wow, the idea to me was super mega exciting. I like fantasy, I like Dungeons and Dragons, I like Pathfinder 2, I had to say that, just to be balanced and to give, what's due to everybody. So the idea of combining the storytelling on Dungeons & Dragons, those themes, those ideas, that setting, with the messy but highly thematic gameplay of Betrayal at House on the Hill, very exciting. I was super excited. Let's take a closer look at the game, and then I'll tell you what I thought about what I think about the game after, actually playing it, not just being excited about it. If you have played Betrayal at House on the Hill, you will be very familiar with most of the concepts in this game. Each character is represented by a miniature on the board that marks the position of the character in the story world, and then the stats of each character are indicated on a specific player aid. They're double-sided and they have different versions of the same character with different stats and different special abilities. And here you have these indicators that move up and down as the players take hits, lose might or speed or sanity or knowledge, or gain more points in a certain stat due to game effects. These two, might and speed, represent physical abilities, and these two, sanity and knowledge, represent mental abilities. So when you take a certain type of damage, say physical damage, you can distribute it freely between your two abilities, and the same applies for mental damage. The characters go on the board, as we said, and when they activate, they can move a number of spaces up to their current speed value. For example, she's pretty fast and she can move by five spaces each turn. To move, you simply move on the terrain tiles from one room to the other using doors, using passages. Now here we have two areas that start on the board at the beginning of the game. One is the tavern, which is divided in three areas: the tavern proper, the inner chamber, and the kitchen. Here you find a staircase that goes downstairs to this other place, which is the kitchen basement, and from there you find a door that leads to the catacombs. That's the kind of tavern that I want to go to drink mead and eat pork roast, where there are catacombs that I'm pretty much sitting on and monsters that may come out of those anytime. Sweet. That's my type of tavern, really. Then, as you move from room to room, things may happen. When you move through a door that is facing an open edge, you will draw a terrain tile to indicate the new place that you have discovered. Now, there are three types of places here: the streets, the buildings, and the catacombs. And the type of tile that you draw depends on the type of door that you're leaving through. For example, if I'm going through this door, then I'm exiting the tavern. If I am leaving through the red door, I'm exploring another area within this building. See, yellow door, yellow tiles; red door, red tiles; and the catacomb tiles are marked with the blue color. For example, I'm gonna move here, then I add this tile here, and then when you add a new tile, you need to you do not need to match doors. So basically the color only needs to match the door you're leaving through. So if I'm gonna leave through this door, then that will be a building because that will be a red tile. Symbols will indicate cards that you need to draw. We got events, items, and omens, and I'm not gonna show you a single one of them just to preserve the surprise of discovering the things that are in this game. And the joy and the fun is precisely in part to discover what are the elements of the story world here. So when you draw a card, your turn, after you resolve the card, your turn is over. You cannot perform other actions. And suppose then we have a character here that wants to move there, then we get a building. And here, for example, we get some effects that are described on the cards. You simply do what the text says. Again, a symbol here that indicates that we have an omen card, and then players may decide to go to the basement and to explore areas. And again, we have a dedicated set of tiles. There are a lot of omens in the catacombs. I hope I can tell you that. I hope that's not too much of a spoiler. A lot of omens, Omens are important because at the beginning of the game is pretty much multiplayer solo. No interaction allowed, or at least no attacking each other, no that kind of stuff. Then, at a certain point, the second phase of the game will be triggered. The second phase of the game is called the Hunt, and that is what will determine also the victory conditions. You do not know what kind of game you're playing at the beginning. That's how thematic it is. That's how mechanics here in this game are completely subservient to theme, because the victory conditions may end up being a cooperative or semi-cooperative, a team, everybody but one, that is everybody against a traitor. It may be entirely competitive, everybody against everybody, only one winner. And precisely to cover all the possible situations that may emerge, you will find here a lot of these generic tokens that may mean different things depending on the scenario that is activated during the hunt phase. How do you do that? So, well, during the game, when an omen card is drawn, you roll a number of dice equal to the number of omen cards that have already been drawn. So when the third one is drawn, you roll 3 dice. These are special dice. They show 1 pip, 2 pips, and a blank, and that pattern is repeated twice, so they can only produce results of 0, 1, and 2. You roll a number of dice equal to the number of omen cards that have already been played or drawn. If the total is equal to or higher than 6, then the haunt phase starts, and there is a procedure that you use to determine which of the 50 available haunts that these main scenarios are going to be played. A player picks up the Traitor Stone and determines which scenario is going to be played. The other players take the Secrets of Survival and separately they read them. And sometimes the scenarios match because it's a cooperative scenario and everybody knows the same thing. Same information is available to everybody. In many cases, information is non-symmetrical. Say the traitor is told that to win, the traitor needs to go to a certain room in the catacombs, whereas the other players are told in the other manual that to win they need to stop the traitor. And the fact that they do not know where the traitor wants to go, of course, adds a lot of suspense and interest to the experience. This idea of rolling a number of dice and adding the results together is also at the base of other types of tests. A lot of game effects will tell you test a certain ability and will give you the difficulty of the test. Then you roll a number of dice equal to the ability that you have. Say she's testing knowledge and she rolls 3. She's testing sanity, then she rolls 6 dice. She's very sane. And you add together the total that you roll and you compare it with the target number of the task you're trying to perform to see if you succeed or not. The same goes for combat. At the beginning of the game, during the main phase or the first phase, the early phase, no one can attack anybody else. Later, combat may occur. Maybe, again, non-playing monsters are added to the board and they do bad stuff. Maybe the characters are attacking each other. When you're attacking a target, you roll usually a number of dice equal to your might, unless you have some ability that allows you to use other traits. For example, she can. But by default is might. You roll a number of dice equal to your might and you total the result. The opponent, whether another player or a non-playing character, will roll dice based on their ability that is being used. You compare the results. If it's a tie, nothing happened in that attack. If somebody has a total which is higher than the opponent, the player with the highest total inflicts a number of hit points on the opponent equal to the difference between the two combat numbers. And that, again, if you're using might and standard physical melee combat, results in a number of physical losses, which then you can assign to your character, distributing them between might and speed. And these are really the main ideas in the game. Move around, just trying to gain as much power as you can find powerful items, exploit events to gain certain types of advantages, beef yourself up, make yourself strong and capable of doing a lot of things, because then when the hunt starts and you know actually what you've been preparing for, then the game starts moving fast and you are then struggling to try to meet your victory conditions, whatever they may be. The world is varied. It feels more varied and more, well, in that sense, interesting, more unpredictable than that of the previous games in the system, because now instead of having just different floors of a house, you have really majorly, I'm not sure that that's a word, but massively different places. Outside, you have streets and squares that usually give you certain advantages if you spend the time. If you stay there for a while, there are one-time advantages, but they can be very good. In the catacombs, you will find a lot of omens. Inside the buildings, in the cities, a little bit of everything. So there is nice variety there. But in general, this is how the game plays. The game is great fun. If you loved Betrayal at House of the Hill and you do not have any sort of moral, religious, philosophical thing against fantasy, you're gonna love this one. If anything, I can say this game is not gonna change anybody's mind about the Betrayal at House of the Hill system. I don't know if it's a system. I guess it is now. Before then, it just was a game with an expansion. Now we got 2 games. A little bit of a system. Maybe next one is going to be Betrayal, a deep space station. It's going to be in space. It's going to be weird and dark, with reminiscences from Alien, the video game Dead Space. But I'm going too far with my imagination. I'm going there where no designer of Betrayal has gone before. What we have here is a messy game, exactly like the previous one. Mechanically, again, it may entirely happen that the mechanics of the game pretty much fall into what in other games would be horrendous flaws. When the hunt starts, a side or a player may have a huge advantage because maybe they're sitting exactly where they're supposed to be to win the game, or very close, or they have exactly the resources that they need, or almost. It may be that for a player or a party, it's literally impossible to win the game once the hunt starts. The hunt is the second part of the game, because the 2 parts are so entirely disjointed, disconnected, because the play area is built randomly, because cards and events enter randomly. It's impossible for a design to take into account all possible combinations with 50 scenarios and balance them. And in fact, luckily enough, they haven't even tried. When you play the game, you know what you're in for. You know what the trade-off is going to be. The game may be a complete mess mechanically, and yet incredibly fun, incredibly enjoyable for the theme, for the story, for the characters. The fact here that the theme is so rich, is so specific. We have a whole world of Dungeons and Dragons to borrow from, as opposed to Betrayal, which was great, but was a little more generic. It was modern horror, some Lovecraftian things, some other things, great variety there. But to me, the fact that we have a setting which is incredibly rich, I mean, you know that there's stuff from Dungeons and Dragons here. That means it can still be a lot of stuff, because the world of Dungeons and Dragons has so many layers. There's so much stuff in it. So it's entirely surprising, and yet so thematic, so vivid, so evocative, because it comes from a role-playing game. It has been designed for to be cool stuff, to be the stuff the dreams are made of to start with. So you have huge variety. And yet personality, again, there's a strong sense of personality that you do not necessarily have with the horror elements of the original game. I like very much, if there is something different, I like very much the fact that now we have 3 types of locations that have their flavor, their distinct personality. I like that very much. Then also there is a little more control that you have in when to start the hunt. If somebody goes down the catacombs early on, they're going to find a lot of omens, and so that's going to make it likely that the hunt will start sooner, but that doesn't necessarily translate into them winning, because some of the omens may have been negative, other players may have acquired better stuff. And again, once the hunt starts, it just may be anything and everything, and somebody who's just acting lazy, procrastinating outside in the alleys of town will be in a better position. So I like the variety, the geographic variety, together with the thematic variety and the fantasy element. Also, I'm personally a big fan of fantasy games, so I love Dungeons and Dragons in general. I love fantasy games and fiction, even in a broader sense. To me, this is a very, very good combination. Again, in a sense, don't get me wrong, Betrayal at House on the Hill and Betrayal at Baldur's Gate are bad games. As games, they're bad, ludically speaking, but they're great game experiences if you're in the right mood and you're there, if you're in for the ride, for the adventure, for the roller coaster, for the madness, for the theme. Like its predecessors, this is a game that is great as a storytelling engine, as an engine to create playable narratives. If you're able to laugh at the crazy stuff that happens, at some of the incongruities that will occur, then and you can go past that and see the thematic richness of the story, then you're gonna have a great time with this game. Precisely like with the previous one, maybe a little bit better. Again, because of the different map that has more variety and personality, because of the more detail and evocative setting that Dungeons and Dragons provides, to me, Betrayal at Baldur's Gate is a better game experience, is a better storytelling engine than the original. I know it's almost like an heretical thing to say, but I just said it because I think it. I like this one better just because I like fantasy so much. I like Dungeons and Dragons, and I like the new type of space that the tiles create here. I like the scenarios. I find everything great, and all the horrendous flaws of the original game are here too, but we learn to love those too. And again, if you can laugh, if you can say this is just crazy, I'm gonna lose this game because this game is insane, but I'm gonna have some fun stories to tell to my friends later. If you're in that perspective, then you can't go wrong. If you enjoy Betrayal at House on the Hill and you don't have anything against fantasy, you will enjoy Betrayal at Baldur's Gate. Is it gonna be redundant in your collection? Maybe, because they're so similar mechanically. But again, it is about the experience. It's not about, oh yeah, rolling dice, strategizing that way. I've seen that before. If you see the game from the mechanical point of view, then it's entirely redundant. But this reskinning of Betrayal at House on the Hill, this metamorphosis into a fantasy game while keeping the design almost untouched mechanically, makes for a different experience because the game was about the experience, the theme, and the story to start with. In other cases, I could be critical of a game. It's just a rethemed version of that other game. Just stick with the other one. But the theme is the thing, so having a new thing changes the thing itself. And to me, I'm happy that they purchased this game. I'm entirely happy with the investment. I don't find it redundant because the theme is new and the game was always to start with about the theme. Some games are about the cones. This one is about the theme and the story. Betrayal at Baldur's Gate. If you like the first one, I think you're gonna like this one very much. Maybe you'll join me into thinking that this one is even the better one of the two. Personally, I like it more. I don't know. Which one do you like more? Let me know. But in general, I hope you give it a try because this is a really good game.